Thank you all for coming out today. We're very excited to have luthier Tom Kerr here with us today at the Guitar Society. Tom and I met over 20 years ago when he was a participant in the University of Cincinnati CCM Guitar Workshop. I was teaching and Tom was participating with his son. Tom's a luthier. He makes guitars. He also helps to repair guitars. Yeah. He has a table over there with some items you can take a look at after the concert. There's also a table with archive materials. The Guitar Society has actually been around since 1959, and I have some big stacks of materials that if you're interested in taking a look at or even want to take home with you, feel free to do so. But I'll let Tom get started. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks. You might want to hold off on that. Thank you. My name's Tom Kerr. I build guitars, mostly classical guitars, and I have done repair work over the many years for many people. And how I got started, I'll just talk a little bit about myself before I talk about, I was going to talk about guitar top wood today, so can you hear me? No. Is this microphone?
No, that is for you.
Oh. All right, I'll try to be a little louder. I built guitars. I got started back in 1978. My bachelor's is in industrial technology, and then I got a master's in education. And in between, I was going to be a grad assistant in the industrial technology department, and they had a guitar building workshop that was funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. And I was fortunate enough to get in there before I went on to being a graduate assistant in the same department and learning from my master. So before I get started on the presentation, this is the first slideshow run I've done of this presentation, so hopefully I hit the right buttons and everything goes okay. Back in 1978, this fella, Haskell Hale, was the master guitar builder they brought in for 1 month. And you can see him in the, I don't know how well you can see it, but under the yellow label. And he came in for a workshop for 1 month. And we did guitar building intensely for 1 month. And his big claim to fame was he got in with Chet Atkins, and once he built a classical guitar for Chet Atkins that they put into the Smithsonian actually in the early 80s. I believe there's a presentation, which you can look that up online. But so he was very fortunate to be around that fella. And this is the second picture is just the class when we were almost done with our first guitar. So, and I'd done woodworking before that, so that's it. So as far as today's presentation, people are always asking me, when you build guitars, do you build from a kit? It's like, well, in a way. And I don't know if you can see this picture. Somebody sent me this cartoon, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty appropriate because everything we build is out of rough sawn lumber, which means it's not a kit per se. It's rough sawn lumber. And I've got some examples over here on the side table for afterwards you can look at of some finished products, a fretboard, a neck, and a side, and then some rough sawn lumber, which is just chunks of wood. So let's see. As far as talking about guitar tops, it's important to understand where wood comes. Some of this may be going off in a woodworking tangent, which is what I do, so sorry about that. But where the wood for guitars comes from, if you can see when you saw a log up, you can see the quarter sawn section. That means if you take a log and cut it into quarters, those surfaces where those quarters come together, the grain is perpendicular to the surface of the wood that's exposed. And you can see that on this drawing here, that the grain is perpendicular. And what's important about that, and most guitar woods are made out of quarter sawn wood, and what's important about that is in this slide you can see the expansion and contraction, so that once wood takes on moisture and lets off moisture, it either dries or it gets more wet. And you've seen guitars that dry out, sometimes the top cracks. That's because it's contracting as it loses moisture. So as you see in this drawing, the different wood cuts, the quarter sawn wood piece down here, it expands and contracts in a controlled fashion. In other words, it's more controlled in that it goes this way, and as opposed to for example, the one on the top, when it dries out, it curls. And this is a natural function of the way the wood is built. So when you hear somebody say quarter sawn wood, that's why when you look at a guitar top and the grain is perfectly straight, that's because it's perpendicular. The growth rings are perpendicular, like you see in the lower left corner there. So when I say quarter sawn wood, that's what that means. Let's see. Now, where does this tree wood come from? Here's a picture. Well, it's not a very good picture, but this is some Alaska and Sitka spruce being, after they cut the trees down, this fellow's out here in the woods with a chainsaw cutting up blanks, big slabs of wood that will then later be cut down, and I'm going to work through that process. So I don't know if anybody can see that, but that's a guy with a chainsaw cutting big Sitka spruce trees down. And then after the spruce is cut into slabs, then if you can see this, it's then resawn into thin pieces, which make up the guitar tops. So pieces of wood. And I don't know if can you all see this very well? Okay, from up here. So anyway, it gets ripped into a bunch of thin pieces. That's worse. There you go. So after the spruce is cut up into thin pieces, sometimes a 1/4 inch, 5/16 thick, we call that rough sawn spruce pieces, then that's the way I buy it. And when it comes into my shop, or if I resaw it myself, then I do what's called stick stacking, and that means the pieces are laid like this with little strips of wood in between, so that as it ages, air will flow all around the wood, and it will dry equally and acclimate to my shop. And any wood I get, I'll always have a minimum of 1 year in my shop so that it will acclimate to the humidity in the shop. Because before you build a guitar, you want all the wood to be acclimated to the same humidity content, so that as it builds, it'll expand and contract together and stay stable. So this is, like I said, this is these tops in this picture. I bought these probably 18 years ago. These are Europeans, so they're cut from trees over in the mountain ranges, Apennine mountain ranges that used to be called German spruce tops, but those mountain ranges run all the way down to Italy. So any trees that grow up and down through those mountains, that's European spruce nowadays. And then here's just a picture of what we call book match. And then when you saw a piece of wood open, if you lay it open like you do a book, that's called book match. So you got a mirror image. So your top, and all your guitar, the backs are typically book matched, the tops are definitely book matched. So this is like a set of book match top set when you open it up. And here's a set of wood just ready to glue up. And then here's a top that has been glued up, and I've inlaid the rosette in the top, and I've rough cut it out to the shape, and I've cut the sound hole out, because you always before you cut the sound hole out, you've got it nailed to a backboard, and you inlay the rosette, and then that keeps it stable, and then after that you cut out the center. So there it is, rough. Now, and this is a picture of a finished Western red cedar top in this case. And it's been sanded down, smoothed and coated and ready for the next step, which is the most important step, and that's the bracing on the inside of a guitar top. Every guitar guitar's sound comes from the bracing and the top material. That's the most important aspect of a guitar. And there are many bracing patterns out there, you've heard of them. And, but the original bracing pattern, or one that they developed, a fellow named Torres developed what's called the fan strutting bracing pattern. And it is what it says. It's basically, the pattern is like a fan, you know, opened up. And that became pretty much standard in the 1800s. And then after him, another fellow German named Hauser, he came up with his own design using the fan bracing design. And his claim to fame was he built a nice guitar that Segovia said was his best guitar he ever had, right? So that Hauser guitar became kind of a basic of this is the target for what you want for a guitar. And that guitar is in a museum in New York, and they allowed a guy to go in there and do measure drawings analyze the guitar and do measure drawings of the entire guitar, which you can look up online. They're available. And so that became kind of the basis for fan strutting. And then over in the future years, we have variations of that. Like this is my pattern, and this is a variation on the fan strutting. But it's pretty close to what most of them are historically, and that's the kind of guitars I build, pretty traditional from that school of thought. So that was it on preparing the top and getting it ready. I was going to say something else about that. Anyway, that's it. So after that, I wanted to talk about something that was near and dear to my heart. I do repair work. So a lot of times I see guitars come in that are cracked. The tops are cracked. And the majority of the time, the reason of that is big swings in humidity or heat. Heat dries out guitar tops and causes them to contract and crack. That's the most reason why they crack. Sometimes too much humidity can cause it to expand and pop up. That's another problem. But the next slide I want to show to you, I got permission from a friend of mine. I built him a left-handed guitar in 1991, and he was very proud of this guitar. So over the years, he tells me, and he lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So over the years, he says, well, Tom, it's developed a crack. I said, well, just bring it back and I'll fix it, because I built it, I'll fix it. No money, no cost, no nothing. He goes, well, that's a long way to go. Okay. So he didn't come for many years, and he told me he had a crack, so I kept trying to get him to come. So about 2 years ago, he said, well, Tom, the bridge blew off of it. I said, well, what? And he goes, yeah, the bridge blew off of it. I said, why? Anyway, I said, where do you keep this, Neil? And he says, oh, I keep it in my living room. And I said, well, is it subject to sunlight coming in and shining on the guitar? He goes, oh yeah, I'm so proud of it. I have it on a stand where the light shines on it every day. And it's like, oh no. I said, don't do that, Neil. So anyway, he stops by a couple of years ago, and I looked at it, and I'm thinking it would just be the bridge was off, you know, and a crack. Well, here's a picture of what I don't know if you can see that very well. But it had about, 18 cracks in the top where the bridge had finally blown off. It took some wood from the top with it. It ripped chunks of wood. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's some a giant chunk here, many smaller chunks that were ripped out. And so he was in my shop, and I said, man, Neil, and you said it had a crack. I said, this is kind of bad, but I never expected anything like this. He said, well, can it be fixed? I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll fix it, and I'll use it as a learning exercise in figuring out and developing techniques to do all the cracks and all the patching work. So that's what I did. And but the thing is, here's the bridge. On the upper picture, you can see all the wood that it ripped off from the top with it. And you can't just glue that back on. You have, and there's the bottom, I prepared it where I have to remove all that wood, and then in the top itself, I have to actually inlay new wood where all these ripped pieces of wood came off. And typically in a normal crack of a top, basically what you do is you saw out the crack, you cut a V groove in that where that crack is, and then you inlay a new piece of spruce that's shaped with that exact V, inlay it, and use hot hide glue. Hide glue is what people make guitars out of because you can take it apart. You can heat it up and steam it, and it will come apart. And guitar people that do repair work, you need to have that so you can take it apart and repair it. So anyway, I went through and patched all this wood, and I told Neil, I said, "No, Neil, aesthetically, it's not going to look that good because you're going to see a lot of these patches. Some of them you won't, some of them you will. But structurally and tone-wise, because I use hot hide glue and that simulates the spruce cells when it's crystalline when it dries and it has a nice tone. I said, it will sound good, so I'm going to do this. So that's what I did. So it was a lot of work. But here's the guitar after, which you can't see very well, but some of the giant chunk of wood that was inlaid, you know. One last thing. Whenever I build a guitar, I keep all the extra top wood and back wood so that if a guitar of mine ever comes back with a crack, I use the original wood. So the color, the patina, I can match pretty well. But on guitars that I don't build, matching that patina is almost impossible because you don't know, you don't have the exact wood that it was made from, and you don't know the exact finish that the person used on the guitar, but you can get close and stuff. So anyway, I got this guitar finished and called him up and met up with him and gave it back. And here's my happy friend. He got his guitar back, and for nothing. And his wife swore an oath that she would never let him keep it in the living room in the sunlight again. So that's pretty much, that was it. So over on the table, I've got a neck blank halfway in process, and then just a chunk of mahogany neck wood that you can see. So that it isn't really a kit. It comes in rough sawn lumber is when I build guitars. So that's really, I don't know how well I did on time on this, but if anybody, we got a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or.
Yeah, what you described is how you do things. Is that typical of manufacturing, other manufacturers?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what?
What you described here, is that basically typical of what other manufacturers do?
Yeah, hand-built guitar. Most guitars are pretty much built the same way. Yeah, pretty much built the same way. There are variations. The biggest variation seems to be in the tops, what the different thicknesses, how many thousandths of an inch they are in different zones, the actual bracing pattern, the thickness and the width of the bracing, that sort of thing. That's a big variable.
Spruce, if that's the type of wood that is required that you use, does that make a difference as far as the tone goes?
Yes. There's, for example, on tops, you've got Sitka spruce, which is usually made, they make steel string guitars out of, and it has what I like to call a tinny or brightness, tinny brightness, and then you've got European spruce, which has a more mellow sound. You know, and then you have Western red cedar, which also has a nice mellow sound. So it depends on what you want for your guitar, you know, because different people like the different tones when they're playing guitar, and it can either go from bright, mellow. It's hard to describe the tones, but yes, it makes a huge difference in the sound. Anybody else? Yes.
How about Adirondack spruce? Is that better than the Sitka spruce?
I've not used that, so I can't really say. So. Anybody else?
Tom,
Yes, great.
What did you get in, how did you get interested in building guitars and repairing guitars?
Well, as far as building, I was, when I got my bachelor's in industrial technology, I built a lot of furniture, woodworking, grandfather clocks, a lot of classical furniture, and learned that. And my professor, who was my mentor, he went and lived with this fellow Haskell Hale for 6 weeks on a sabbatical to learn how to build guitars. And he brought that back to our university, and I was going to be his grad assistant in the fall, and I was married at the time in school, and I was working that summer at where I went to school. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, Tom, you know, a guy dropped out from New York. I got a slot for you for free if you want to join us." I said, "Yeah." So I wanted to learn to build guitars that way. And then once I started, then I started building classical guitars with him, another 3 more guitars with him. I was with him for 2 years. I just really like the classical guitar because, for one, it doesn't hurt your fingers as bad as a steel string. And 2, the sound I like, the mellow sound I like a lot better. I just like it better. So that's how I got started. And then once I started with him, I just continued building on and off for a few years, or, you know, for over time. And then the repair work, I just got into that as people asked me to do things, and I said, well, if I know how to do it, I'll do it. If I don't, I would tell people I don't know how to do that. So it's very important not to mess up somebody's guitar. If you don't have the skill and don't know, I divert to, no, I can't do that. So, yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yeah, Wayne.
Do you still accept order for classical concert guitar?
Do I?
Accept order for concert guitar?
Yeah, I built one. It's been 2 years, the last one I built, to custom order. Yeah. And I have a couple of guitars at home if anybody are for sale. If anybody wants to look at my website and come try them out, I'll be glad to show them to you anytime. So, okay, I think we're done.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate it. How do you get on?